A big key phrase we hear a lot these days is being able to regulate your emotions. In other words, if you have something that triggers you or upsets you, how do you not spiral off into a panic and be like, oh my God, I got to fix this problem quickly. Or, oh my God, I feel like I'm going to die because somebody's mad at my husband's mad at me. I'm going to die. This is horrible. All of which are emotions that I used to have all the time. So we got your physical health, we got your emotional health. And then I'm going to put in a different category, mental health, because I think mental health also is very tied with I think there's a lot of physical aspects that affect our mental health.
Welcome to A Founder's Life, and I'm your host, Leo Gestetner. My guests and myself share our entrepreneurial journeys and our methods for a balanced life. I'm joined here today by Sam Enslen. Sam, thank you for joining us. Would you like to introduce yourself?
Sure. I am Samantha Enslen. Like you said, I live in the United States, in the great state of Ohio, right here in the middle of the country. And I run a marketing and communications firm called Dragonfly Editorial. We really focus on B2B content. So we work with customers who are in, for example, finance or management consulting or medicine and healthcare, architecture, engineering, and construction, anything that kind of has pretty complex solutions and products that need to be explained. We help people explain those clearly to their customers and their audience.
Excellent. And tell us a little bit about how you got there. What was your journey that brought you to this?
Oh my gosh. I probably have a different story than most founders because I think that I have an accidental business. I was in the corporate world and doing corporate communications for a number of years. And then I got married and started having children and wanted to move back to Ohio, where my family lives. My husband and I met out in the DC area where I lived for 15 years. And so I came back to Ohio with really no greater plan than that was fun. Now I'm just going to relax and do some freelance writing and editing, raise my kids, be with my extended family. And then I started getting asked to do more jobs than I could handle myself and bigger jobs than I could handle myself. Now, luckily, when I had my corporate role, one of my responsibilities was to hire freelancers. So I already knew a bunch of freelancers in the creative world, writing, editing, design. So it was very natural for me to start reaching out to them and just saying, hey, could you help me, not my company, could you help me with this project? My former company, that is. And so things just started to grow from there. After about 5 years, I got pregnant again. And I was like, this is a good time to hire somebody full time because A, I want to take some maternity leave, and B, I think it's time. We had enough work coming in that it made sense to have somebody who was just the point person for all of that, to take in the work, assign it, and so forth. And I can tell you more, but things just kept growing from there.
Well, why don't we pivot to what the business is now, what a typical client looks like, and what you do for those clients?
Sure. Who was our first client?
And what you do for those clients.
Oh, what we do for those clients. Sure. Well, okay. So fast forward. So that was in 2005. So fast forward 20 years. Now we're in 2025. So right now we have about 25 full-time employees. We still work with freelancers or contractors, probably have another 30 of those folks that we work with on a regular basis. Because in the world of communications, and we also help companies with marketing communications, what they call thought leadership, which is what we're doing right now, Leo, sharing our thoughts as industry leaders with the world. And the goal in the corporate world is to establish yourself as what they call a thought leader. In other words, wow, that person really knows their industry. That's definitely who we should talk to about our problem. So we help people create the marketing, communications, the thought leadership. And then we do something a little bit more niche called proposals, which is where somebody, a company wants to respond to a RFP, a request for proposal that another company has put out. And they may need to provide a written response of why they're the best person to hire. Sometimes that's in 20 pages. If you're responding to a government RFP, it might be in 500 pages or 2,000 pages. I kid you not. In the US, we have Medicare, Medicaid proposals to win like a state Medicare job those, like I said, those are in the 500 to 2,000 pages. It's kind of crazy. Anyway, because of those different types of work and the different types of companies we have, it tends to be very cyclical. Well, actually, cyclical is not even the word. It's more like a roller coaster that never ends. Sometimes the work's really up, sometimes it's really down. So that's why it works for us to have a core group of full-time employees, but then they are backed by that really trusted group of contractors. And that lets us scale up when our customers have a lot of work and then scale down when they're quieter. So that's kind of our size today. The type of work we are creating, it's like I said, it's in those three different categories. But what that looks like, that could mean writing or designing websites or web copy, blog pages, brochures, fact sheets, what they call white papers, which is nothing more than just a fancy word for a report on a different topic. So reports, annual reports, really social media, just about video, just about any type of written or verbal communications that a B2B company wants help creating to connect with their audience. That's where we come in.
Sounds pretty varied, although I'm still stuck around that 2,000 word governmental report. I'm sort of wondering, an AI, an AI could probably take that
2,000 page,
2,000 page, sorry, 2,000 page report. And I think, an AI could probably take that and take it down to maybe 5 pages. So could a human, but you wouldn't have the patience, you'd fall asleep. But an AI could take that down to 5 pages. But the government would probably still, even if they had an AI reading it, taking it down to 5 pages, they'd probably still want the 2,000 report, which is just ridiculous, because what you do with all this paper. And half of them probably need actually submitting in paper.
Golly. I mean, back in the day, we did. I remember well staying up all night. Our company had a copy center that was like a FedEx on steroids with these massive copy machines. You can imagine, and back in the day, you had to turn in like 20 copies of the proposal so they could have different people reading different sections. So you can imagine 20 copies of this by 2,000 pages. All of a sudden, yeah, you're talking about a lot of paper. And no, largely that's not done anymore. Everything is submitted digitally.
I'm still trying to work out. I look at my tax return that is like, I don't know, that thick. And I try understanding what actually is in it. There can't be more than 100, 200 different numbers, maybe presented a whole bunch of different ways. Why not just collect the numbers and analyze it? It seems more sense. But hey, I don't work for the IRS, so maybe there's a reason. And tell us a little bit about family and what that means to you.
Sure. Well, you could say one of the reasons I started Dragonfly was because of family. So like I said, my husband and I lived out in the Washington, D.C. area. We met out there. We had one child. I got pregnant with our second child. And at that point, I just felt like something's not right. The DC area is extremely hectic. Everybody works. There's traffic. We had to take our child to daycare every day. It's not a fun lifestyle. And gosh, if you need help, if you're sick one day, who's going to help with the kids? There's nobody. So long story short, I convinced my husband to move back to Ohio with me, where I was born and where I grew up. And I basically gave him a PowerPoint presentation convincing him of why somebody who'd lived many places in the world should move to Dayton, Ohio, which is not very exciting. And my pitch was this: I love the work I do. You hate the work you do. You're totally burnt out. So come back with me to Ohio. You can be a stay-at-home dad, take care of the kids, and I will start Dragonfly and do what I love, which is writing, editing, publications, and somehow support our family doing that. And guess what? My parents are there to babysit the kids when we need, so we can go to the movies. So this was my big pitch, and he went for it. And so we've been here ever since, which is now coming on 20 years. Unbelievable. So the decision to start Dragonfly actually was driven by a desire to have a better quality of life, if you will, for our kids. Not financially better quality of life, but better quality of life in terms of having a parent who's home with them during the day.
And how old are the kids now?
Now they are, I'm going to say 23, 21. And then we have Tommy, who's still in high school. She's just getting ready to turn 16.
Excellent. Nice big family. And what does health mean to you? And I often think of health as, that could be sleep, that can be mental health, nutrition, fitness, whatever that looks like for you.
Well, that's a big Excuse me, that's a big question. And for me, a really complicated question because I feel like that term work-life balance is so overused. So I'm not even going to start with that. I mean, to me, health is a balance of physical health, a balance of emotional health. A big key phrase we hear a lot these days is being able to regulate your emotions. In other words, if you have something that triggers you or upsets you, how do you not spiral off into a panic and be like, oh my God, I got to fix this problem quickly. Or, oh my God, I feel like I'm going to die because somebody's mad at my husband's mad at me. I'm going to die. This is horrible. All of which are emotions that I used to have all the time. So we got your physical health, we got your emotional health. And then I'm going to put in a different category, mental health, because I think mental health also is very tied with I think there's a lot of physical aspects that affect our mental health, probably even in more ways than are currently recognized by the medical establishment, if you will. So the past 5 years for me specifically have really been a journey of trying to get all three of those in sync. The physical part has largely been easier for me because I've always been an athlete my whole life. Work out, I play competitive tennis, but the mental health and the emotional health have been much more challenging. And the way that all three of those dovetail together to create how you exist and how you interact with the world on a day-to-day basis, for me has been very complex and something, not saying I'm perfect now, but I like to think that I have untangled a lot of confusion in those three.
None of us are perfect. Life is a journey. We hopefully improve a little bit every day.
Yeah.
And what do you like to do for fun?
Oh my gosh. So my idea of fun is probably different than others. Well, I said I play tennis competitively. So that's one piece. I love competition. I think a big mental issue for a lot of athletes is obviously you want to win. That's kind of the point of competition. But at the same time, you can't care about winning. You have to care about the process and what personal effort you're putting into it, what you're trying to accomplish. And then if you win, that's just a bonus. So that's kind of like the mental game. And honestly, Leo, older I get as a competitor, the more I feel like dealing with the pressures of playing tennis, dealing with the strain translates so directly to regular life because okay, so let's take a tennis match. I can really cater my diet to optimize my stamina and my health. I can work out to strengthen my muscles. I can hydrate. I can do all this kind of like mental preparation we're talking about. So those are the things I can control coming to the court. I can do my best to control my emotions on the court. Guess what? I can't control the person I'm playing against. They may be having the best day of their life and, absolutely grind me into the dust out there. So that's the point where you can't have the winning is everything because you can't control that outcome. So I really try to focus on what I can control.
Great lesson. Focus on what you can control and let go of the rest. That actually is a lot of my philosophy in life. And maybe that's why I wouldn't be a very good competitive athlete. The way I've always phrased it to people is I don't believe in stressing about things that I can't control. If stress wouldn't help me achieve a better outcome, then I generally don't stress. And I've always been that way. I've been lucky, but that's always been the way I've been. So it doesn't mean I don't have stress, but generally I don't live with day-to-day stress, even if I'm in a very stressful situation, because if I can't do anything about it, why stress over it?
Yeah. Well, that's a very good way of putting it, Leo. And, I was talking about my health journey. One of the things that came up, I did some genetic testing, blood testing over the past 3 to 5 years. And guess what? My cortisol levels were really high. That's that's what you have when you're stressed. And we know that's not good for you. So, so I'm deliberately thinking about that. Like, how can I reduce that stress? And a lot of it is figuring out how to coach yourself into not worrying about stuff you can't control. Figure out what is the one thing, even a small thing I can do in this situation. And I'm going to do that. And yeah, then I just can't stress about the rest of it. As you said, because it's not being productive. It's not helping me get anywhere. It's not solving the problem. In the United States in particular, people can get very wound up about politics right now, as they should. But whatever side of the fence you're on, you're probably upset right now. But having day-to-day angst about it, that's not helping me. That's actually not helping the problem at all. It's just making you miserable and increasing your cortisol. So, I'm coaching my daughter, or attempting to coach my daughter on this, who's, like I said, she's almost 16. So she's, feels everything that's going on very personally. And I think almost feels like a moral obligation to be upset all the time. Because if you're not upset, that means you don't care. And I don't think that's the case. I think you can care deeply and also know that you have to take care of yourself and protect your own sanity, your own mental and emotional health, and then make very specific decisions about what am I going to do? What is my way in the world that I am making change? And it may be very small. For some people, it might be going to a protest. For some people, it might be making donations to a certain political party or a certain cause. For somebody, it might be going to the animal shelter and volunteering. Because I can't do anything about politics, but dagnabbit, I'm going to do one thing to bring some good into the world. I'm going to go and sit with those dogs and cats or take them for walks like that, so that I know that I am being a force for good in the world, however tiny it is. For me, with Dragonfly, I feel that as a business owner, I have taken on the responsibility for, 25 to 30 people's lives, as well as their extended family. My responsibility is to maintain a business that's sustainable, that's profitable, so they can have good salaries, competitive salaries, so they can have health insurance. I believe very much in creating an atmosphere where people feel supported, that they have as much freedom as possible in their roles. They're not micromanaged. I hope we are not overworking people and, giving them a realistic workload. If they have to work a ton one week to serve a customer, take some time off the following week. So I'm like, that's my contribution to the world, is showing people that work doesn't have to be horrible. Bosses don't have to be horrible. Gosh, people actually can be supportive and can care about one another in the workplace. If I don't have time to go to a protest, that's okay, because that's not what my role in this world is. I think I have many roles, but being agitated and upset all day long about politics is not going to be one of them.
Yeah, for me, I may have my views, which I can discuss with friends and things, but I've always been pretty non-partisan. And in terms of, especially in business, I think all these views I see on LinkedIn on either view, I'm like, it's a business tool. I have no interest in sharing a political opinion in a business environment. I also, to be honest, protests or those kind of things have never especially interested me. It doesn't, each to their own, should never be my thing. For me, my way of making a difference, which I'd say it's completely non-partisan, but it's always been. For many years, I've been involved in charities, teaching education, children's education. Most recently, I was involved for 11 years on the board of a charity teaching entrepreneurship to underserved communities. And to me, that makes a long-term difference to people's lives and break cycles. And that's sort of where I'd like to make a difference. I'm happy to say my daughter has a lot of similar opinions. Actually, she joined the charity after I left the board when I moved out of the US. And how does a balanced life look for you? And just to clarify, when I say balanced life, nothing's permanently imbalanced. Unless you're a Buddhist monk, you're not imbalanced. It's the overall center line of balance. How does that look for you?
Well, that's also a good question, also a big question. I think, okay, let me go back to 2020. We had COVID, obviously. We hit the point here in the States where the kids' schools were closed. They were moved to online school. So all of a sudden we had 3 kids at home. I think, maybe at that point, both 2 in high school and 1 in middle school, maybe something like, or maybe even 6th grade, something like that. That was also a critical time at Dragonfly when we were experiencing a huge amount of growth. So there was a lot of chaos at work. There was a lot of figuring out what are we doing wrong here? We're having all this growth, yet everything feels completely chaotic. What do we need to do differently? So I kind of had to have all focus on work. But at the same time, my kids are sitting home, rotting on the computer all day. So I started coming home. I was like, I am just going to go to work and focus, and I'm going to be done at 3:00, and I'm just coming home at 3:00. And so I started doing that. And guess what? I've kept doing that ever since. So I have a shortened workday. I often don't really start till 10. I often just work till about 3. And I try to be, so that's one thing, just in terms of pure schedule. I try to be very limited in what my schedule is. And when I'm at the office, try to be as locked in as I can there. And then when I go home, I'm done. I literally take a shower as soon as even if it's 3 p.m, I take a shower when I get home, because symbolically for me, that is washing all the cares of the workday away, all those issues. And now I'm just focused on, home and family and mundane things like doing laundry or doing the dishes or cooking. But I find pleasure in those things because they're different from work. They're manual, they're physical things. And I'm not saying that I'm not also probably checking my email in the evenings. I am a human being. It would take a very strong person in this year, 2025, to never look at your phone after 3 p.m. So I do, but not in a way that I feel stresses me out, or there's extremely rarely any case when I would check my email, say at 8 p.m. and be like, oh my gosh, I got to go work on this thing. It's more just kind of keeping an awareness in the back of my brain. So this is going on. Okay, this is something I'm going to have to do tomorrow. So in terms of time frame, that's very important for me. I also, probably the thing that keeps me the most sane is reading in bed at night and reading in bed in the morning, which is also perhaps unusual. I used to get up in the morning like everybody else and go in the kitchen and make a cup of coffee and have some breakfast and sit at the kitchen table and maybe read the paper or what have you. And then one day I had this revelation. I could make my coffee and my breakfast, and then I could go back and sit in bed. I could drink my coffee in bed and read a book. And it has become like the most luxurious way that I start every day. And it might be just for 20 minutes. If I get up early, sometimes I'll sit in bed and read for an hour before I go to work, because that really centers me, that calms me. It's like my safe place, my happy place, all of those things. So that's something that's also essential for me.
Great. Seems like you found a good balance. Definitely do not have a morning like you. I mean, I'm up and within 5 minutes I'm wide awake and doing my stuff, meditate and things like that. And then I've got a routine, and then I'm working pretty early on. And then I fit a workout in mid-morning usually. But I did love, one of the things that came from COVID for me was I was at my desk by 6 a.m. I always am. My team around the world, it works really well. But with COVID, at 4:30, I stopped every day and I worked out with my son for an hour and a half. And then we either did boxing or weightlifting. And then we had dinner and watched some TV together, and it became a routine. And
That's great.
Everyone who knew me knew, I don't do, maybe once or twice a month, I do something in the evening, whether it be business or friends, actually. I stopped doing stuff in most evenings because, to be honest, I always knew my son, he's off at college now. I always knew it was a limited period, so I was happy to take any time I could do with him. And I loved that time, and I know he really loved it as well. So that's one of those nice things that came from us all agreeing to be locked in our homes.
Yes. I will say too, just to quickly follow on one thing you just said about working out after work, that is also something that's very important for me in terms of reducing my own stress and keeping myself sane. We had I think at the end of January this year, we actually did have to do some layoffs at Dragonfly. Some of our work was connected with government contracts that were canceled. So we knew some of our work was going to be going away. I think all through 2024 and through now, we're starting to see the effects of AI on the creative industry. So I believe some of our work had decreased because of that. In any case, it was a very stressful time. I told Greg, my husband, I was like, I don't care what else is going on. I am working out every day after work. Luckily, I like to take classes, cardio classes or lifting classes. Luckily, we live somewhere where they have classes available, usually at 4:30, 5, or 5:15. So I don't care what an inconvenience it is to anything else. I must do that. So that's something else that I can, again, knowing myself helps me get the stress out and stay sane.
Excellent. It's all about finding what works for us. For me, it's often going for a run. I love, I've really got into it. And Took me a long time, but I am running marathons and things now. And there's no question you go out for that. For me, going out for an hour, 2 hour run, it can be actually really relaxing, actually very meditative. And what has been a pivotal moment for you?
Well, I think we've had 2 or 3, and I think we're actually in one right now, but I'll go backwards a little bit. I think, pivotal moments probably for any startup, which I never think of us as a startup, but I suppose we were, is just, cash flow crisis. So we had that early on where we had invoices going out to customers who were taking their own sweet time to pay. And then once you have a quote payroll, oh my God, your life changes where you have full-time employees or contractors that you have to pay every 2 weeks. And then when you're not getting that money coming in on time from your customers. So we had a point where we had to take out a second mortgage on our house. Then we maxed out that line. And, you're having to decide, who do I pay? Who can I pay? Who can I beg to pay later? Greg and I I'm not taking a salary or taking like the absolute minimum we need to survive. I'm on the phone, completely humiliating myself in front of customers, being like, please, can you pay us? I need to pay my payroll. I can't pay my payroll. I'm sure many entrepreneurs have experienced something like that. So that was a bit of a crisis point that we got through. Again, in 2020, I think was a real pivotal point because we had grown, 2020. So probably we'd spent about 10 to 15 years growing really slowly and organically, one person here, one person there. And then all of a sudden we experienced this period of rapid growth. So we went from like 10 employees to 25 or 30, really in the space of a couple of years. And you don't realize it at the time, but the structures you put in place to run your business when it's at a certain size don't work anymore when it's at this size. And guess what? Then they don't work anymore again when you're at this size. 2020 was really a period of figuring out what roles are we missing at Dragonfly? What systems are not working? And when I say systems, I mean both processes that you do with your fellow employees, but also the software we use to manage our projects, to organize our work. We also implemented something that's called Traction, or EOS. EOS stands for the Entrepreneurial Operating System. I don't know, you're smiling, so maybe you're familiar with that. Essentially, it's a system of tools and processes. It's extremely straightforward. It just gives you a standardized way to run your business and set goals that everybody's aware of and keep yourself and others accountable. So that was a huge game changer for us, implementing EOS, that brought a lot of calm. And, we were talking about what can you control, almost like widening your scope of what you can control in the business, or feeling like you have your hands on what you can or need to have your hands on. Makes things feel not so out of control. So that helped us tremendously. And like I said, I feel like we're at another pivotal point right now with the advent of AI. And I don't think any of us really know how that's going to affect the creative industry, the publishing industry, our entire lives moving forward. So that's something that we're grappling with right now. And I don't know how it's going to play out. I don't know what our agency is going to look like in 2 years. I don't know if I'll have an agency in 5 years. These are the things that we're right in the middle of exploring. And how do we change to meet this new challenge? How do we do better work? I'm calling it a challenge, but it's also a tool can be a tool for accelerating and improving the work we do. So how do we harness that for the benefit of ourselves and our customers? This is just a huge challenge that I never thought I would have to face this after 20 years. You think like, oh, at that point, you should be just like on autopilot. Everything's just groovy. Well, no, I think we're facing the biggest challenge we ever had.
Well, thank you. I mean, look, I love your brutal honesty with all of that. And I think that is really the entrepreneurial journey. I think, it is, you're ducking and diving, and, that's the nature of, an entrepreneur. Unless your business really gets to that massive scale, well, you still have to do some of that, but it's a little different. Yeah, most small businesses, which we're all running to one extent or another, that's the entrepreneurial journey. And there's nothing easy about it. I often, when I talk to sort of high schoolers and I mentor them on, the entrepreneurial journey and things, and I'm like, well, if you want the easy option, it is not being an entrepreneur. In fact, if you want to make money, don't become an entrepreneur. Long term, hopefully you make more money, but in the short term, you would definitely make more money as an employee, and probably in the medium term, you make more money as an employee as well. You don't have to do your double mortgage. You don't have to, an entrepreneurial journey is not easy. Personally, there's nothing I'd want to do differently. I love the entrepreneurial journey, but it's not an easy path. People think, it's easy. No, it's not. And what is one piece of advice you would give to an aspiring entrepreneur?
My one piece of advice is focus on what the next right thing is to do. You don't always have to have the big picture. You don't always have to know what the end game is. You don't always have to be a creative genius like J.K. Rowling, who had, who already knew in her head the entire Harry Potter story series beginning to end before she ever started writing the first one. You can just look forward and be like, this is the next thing I need to do. And that has worked for me.
Perfect. And how can people find you?
Sure. Well, our company is called Dragonfly Editorial. So we're just at dragonflyeditorial.com, and you can reach me there, or you can find me on LinkedIn. I'm under my full name, Samantha Enslen.
Well, thank you. I loved hearing your thoughts and journey, and thank you for joining us today.
You are so welcome. It was really fun.
And thank you for listening to today's episode. If you enjoyed the conversation, don't forget to subscribe to the channel, tell your friends, and please leave a review.